Before I give an overview of the origins of this field and how it all came about, I'd just like to explain a little bit about what simultaneous interpretation is. It's not translation. Translation involves the translation, as it were, from one language to another of written documents, and the product is something written. Interpretation is completely verbal, although in the process you may need or try to use written documents. It's also not to be confused with consecutive interpretation, which involves interpreting after the speaker has spoken a few sentences, a paragraph, sometimes a whole speech. Simultaneous interpretation requires speaking at the same time as the interpreter, or roughly at the same time, and mastering the technique of listening, thinking, and speaking at the same time. It can be described as driving a car, but a car that has no steering wheel and no brakes. You don't know which way the speaker is going. You don't know what he's going to say. The shape of the sentence is indeterminate, at least for a while. And also, you have to keep talking. You can't stop until he stopped talking. Somebody also thinks that it's like a game of tennis, where as soon as you sent the ball across to the other side, across the net, your opponent sends it back. You're on your toes all the time. It's a lot of pressure. It's sort of a high-pressure balancing act. To be accurate and convincing, the interpreter must be able to grasp the meaning of the original, to process it mentally, and then deliver it effectively in the output language. It's a profession for people with quick reflexes, strong nerves, and who enjoy the power of persuasive speech. Now I'm going to talk about how the profession came into being. The birth of simultaneous interpretation had everything to do with the Second World War. After World War II, at the Nuremberg war trials in 1945, major Nazi war criminals were put on trial. And for the first time, simultaneous interpretation was provided in 4 languages: English, French, Russian, and German. It had been used on a trial basis before, but Nuremberg was the first time it was used on a large scale. At that time, Eisenhower's personal interpreter, Colonel Doster, organized a team of simultaneous interpreters, put in the system, and those leading interpreters at the time later became interpreters at the United Nations. The interpreters had to see the speakers at the Nuremberg trials, so they were placed very close to the defendants in glass boxes, and we call them booths till this day. The facilities were very primitive. 3 persons had to share one microphone, and the earphones were very, very heavy. They were the size, the microphones were the size of a grenade. So the use of simultaneous interpretation proved successful and facilitated the proceedings, which were long and involved a lot of enormous amount of material. Consecutive interpretation was used by the League of Nations during the early days of the UN. Consecutive meant that the speaker would speak first, then the interpreter would interpret, and so on and so forth. At the League, there were the famous Kamenkar brothers, Jean and André. They were French, and it was said that one of them could listen to a whole hour-long speech without taking notes and then deliver the whole thing accurately without omissions. That's something that someone like me can't imagine. My attention span is much, much shorter than that. Anyway, after the war, at the first session of the General Assembly in London, that was in January 1946, the delegate of Ukraine referred to the Nuremberg trials and the success of the simultaneous interpretation there, and put forward the proposal that UN delegates should be superior diplomats, not necessarily people with superior language skills. The proposal was adopted, and the search was on for good interpreters. So at the fall session of the GA, that was scheduled to be held in New York, the Nuremberg interpreters were to be part of a team who would demonstrate the effectiveness of simultaneous interpretation to UN delegates and officials at the beginning of the GA session. So prior to this, some consecutive interpreters welcomed the new system and trained themselves with written documents and tapes, but others resisted. They were the consecutive interpreters who viewed the simultaneous interpreters with some degree of contempt and called them téléphonistes, telephone operators, because they wore earphones. Anyway, eventually, in spite of some technical glitches with the equipment, the demonstration was successful and the delegates were satisfied with the interpretation. So at that time, as early as in 1946, the Budget Committee, the Fifth Committee, was already the busiest committee at the United Nations, and that was a committee that asked for a team to be pressed into service immediately. Very soon, all the committees of the GA could see how practical simultaneous interpretation was, because it saved a lot of time. You were speaking simultaneously, so you didn't have to wait till several languages had to be interpreted, possibly doubling or tripling the amount of time that a meeting took. So that was a saving in time and also, of course, in money. And before long, all the committees started clamoring for simultaneous interpretation. Eventually, the simultaneous interpreters won out in the power struggle, and this became the dominant form of interpretation at the United Nations. By the early 70s, when I joined the UN, consecutive was used only occasionally or even very rarely in the Security Council, in addition to simultaneous, and the Military Staff Committee was the only organ that used it until very recently, when it was phased out also. I'd like to talk a little bit about how the different booths, the different language groups work together at the United Nations. There are 6 official languages of the UN: Arabic, English, French, Spanish, Chinese, and Russian. So the Secretariat itself uses 2 working languages, English and French, with English being the leading language. For reasons of linguistic and cultural diversity, all 6 languages are considered equal, and there can be no discrimination against any of them. In the mid-90s, there was a General Assembly resolution on multilingualism, where the Foreign Minister of France affirmed its importance. For Chinese, China is the main user, but Singapore has stated at a GA meeting that she uses 2 UN official languages, English and Chinese, though they've never been known to speak Chinese. A number of Asian countries have shown an interest in Chinese. Prior to the completion of the text of the Law of the Sea Treaty in 1982, the chief delegate of China headed up a working group to verify the accuracy of the Chinese version, and there were participants from Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. The majority of member states speak English, with countries that are former colonies of France and Belgium speaking French: Gabon, Senegal, Rwanda, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Those of Spain and South America speak Spanish. Russian has lost ground with the disintegration of the Soviet Union. The countries of the Commonwealth of Independent States are increasingly using English rather than Russian. Say, for instance, the Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Armenia. English has also tended to gain ground over French in countries of the former French Indochina, such as Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Arabic is spoken mainly by over 20 countries of the Middle East, and also by African countries like Somalia. In general, English dominates multilateral diplomacy, especially in meetings where documents are negotiated and drafted.